PLD Projects presents Holy Snokes, the Star Wars podcast, featuring PLD and Matty Gunner. May the Force be with you, always. May the Force be with you, Matty. May the Force be with you, my listeners. May the Force be with you, everybody. Much love. Welcome, indeed, to Holy Snokes, a Star Wars podcast here on the PLD Projects Network. I am your host, PLD. And as always, I'm here with my trusty sidekick, almost as hairy as a Wookiee himself, Mr. Matty Gunner. How are you, my friend?
First off, I'm going to flip it to the dark side and say, may the Force serve you.
Oh, okay, there we go. I'm wearing white, you're wearing black. This makes sense.
I mean, that's if you look at my wardrobe, it's my whole color palette of my clothes is maybe like one purple thing and everything black. So the Sith kind of does suit me, as well as you say, hairy as a Wookiee, which is very fitting for the episode that we're going to be talking about this week.
I never say anything that doesn't have some kind of backwards point or this hidden point somewhere involved in there. I got to say something real quick, though, before we do anything else, before we get into our show today. I always listen to that David B music in the beginning. It always gets me going, ready to talk Star Wars, ready to fall in love with Star Wars all over again. I had a great time last night. I went on Spotify and created my own little playlist of every official Star Wars soundtrack, chronologically speaking. Like started from the Tales of the Jedi, like the Dooku Ahsoka arc, went through everything, all the John Williams, all the Kevin Kiner, all the Mandalorian, Obi-Wan stuff. It's all in one playlist now, and I could not be happier. It's over like 37 hours of music, and it's just a beautiful thing. I love the music of Star Wars.
And then you add the genius that is Samuel Kim.
Yes.
On top of it.
And that's the funny thing is because I did that too. I put all the official stuff, and at the end I was like, and I added like bonus tracks afterwards, which were all Samuel Kim epic versions of them afterwards.
Like when he mixed up the Imperial March with Duel of the Fates, I was just like, whoa.
All of his epic stuff is brilliant. I love how he mixes these things together. He'll come up with these different versions of things. If you don't know who we're talking about, Samuel Kim on YouTube, Spotify, he does all these kind of mixes. He mashes things up together. He creates these great orchestral scores. They really do great service to the original John Williams and Kevin Kiner stuff. It's really a beautiful thing.
And he does mashups with other genres. Like he has one of Duel of the Fates with Hoist the Colors from Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's on my gym playlist because I'm just like, okay, like that gets me so pumped up just because it's like the slow build of Hoist the Colors and then just go straight into Duel of the Fates. I'm like, yep,
there it is.
Yep, that hits the spot.
There's another one he does with Star Wars. He also crosses it over like the Avengers theme as well, and that really works together. It's amazing how well he just makes them just mash up like seamlessly. They feel like they were written together almost, and it's like I don't know how he does it and does it so well, but it's a beautiful thing.
I have no idea. I could never do it. Guys like him and David B, I'm just like, okay, like I'm gonna let you guys work. Just call me when you want me to yell over something.
There you go. Maybe someone I can reach out. Maybe we'll have an interview at some point with him. I love that guy.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool.
But anyway, welcome to Holy Snokes, a Star Wars podcast. We are continuing our journey through Star Wars. We started with The Bad Batch. We're continuing with The Bad Batch. I have a great review of an episode last night, which I really, really enjoyed. I think that it's even it's one of my favorite episodes of the season. I think it had a lot of great touches from the Clone Wars, a lot of touches about where we're going, a lot of great character development, a lot of fun to be had. Even there were some dark twinges to it.
Yeah, it was, again, the thing that the Bad Batch does so well for me is it's the perfect blend of something like Andor, which has its dark themes, and then you have something like Rebels, Clone Wars, Resistance, of like, this is for kids, but we're not gonna beat you over the head with it. Like, we can give you dark and gritty, but not dumb it down.
Right, absolutely. We do have some great. We actually had the return of a Clone Wars character today. Was the one that was finally, it was shown in the trailer, so we were all kind of waiting for when that episode was going to drop. Today was that day. We got to see. All right, Gungi. I said Gungi for a while. I know Force Center says Gungi, for example. Our friends at Force Center. Oh, they said Gungi enough in this episode. I might finally have started to get over the Gungi thing.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Can I just say, at Celebration, when he showed up in the trailer, because I was in the Bad Batch panel, when he showed up in the trailer, I did not hear a pop like it all weekend.
Yeah,
Other
everybody
than
loves
when maybe
Gungi.
Grogu came out on stage, when they had the animatronic Grogu,
Right.
when Gungi was shown in the trailer, people went loco.
And rightfully so. Rightfully so. What a great character. I will add on this. We'll maybe touch base on this later on. I know there's some out there, not necessarily like toxic fans, not necessarily like hardcore fans. Some people say that maybe are there too many Jedi that have survived Order 66 now?
No,
We kind of feel like there's too many of them. Like it kind of that cheapen Order 66. I don't think so yet. I
I
kind of
don't think
like
so.
those stories. Um, I like to see where they go. So, like so far, all the ones that we know that have survived still have their place, or we find out where they were during the rest, like the original trilogy, when there's no Jedi around. And I feel like Gunji is going to be one of those people as well. Although I do hope that we haven't seen the last of Gunji, and I'll explain that later as well. But before we get into that any further, we do have other things we talk about on the show. We do try to do a little bit of news in the beginnings, and if we have a secondary topic, which we do have a secondary topic this week, one that was very much so inspired by this episode. In fact, it was so inspired, I came up with it last night and said, Matty, Audible. I want to add this to our discussion points because it makes sense.
When you said, I'm going to sleep tonight, there's going to be no 4 a.m. DMs. And I check my phone at my time and it's like 4 a.m. your time. I'm like, oh, there's a DM from Paul. I guess he didn't sleep.
How can I sleep when there's Star Wars to be talked about? That's the thing. There wasn't a lot of news though this week to discuss, which makes it easier to add more topics to our show. There were some things I did want to touch base on. The first one I want to mention is Jedi Survivor, which is definitely impacting you. I don't play the games, so I will be learning about this vicariously through you, and I probably will watch you play it when you play along on the channel. But it has been delayed. It was supposed to be released on March, I believe, 17th. I think it was the date. I'm not certain on that.
Yeah,
Don't
March
quote
17th.
me. Okay. Well, now it's not until April 28th. What are your thoughts on that? Does that upset you? Does that?
Hallelujah.
Not exactly the reaction I expected, but go ahead. Okay.
I am very, very pleased with this because for two reasons. One, there is so much going on at that time. Bad Batch, Mandalorian, Battle Scars, High Republic. It was just like, whoa, how am I gonna because I'm like a completionist. I have to like keep up to date with everything.
Right.
And I would just be like, my brain would just be fried. But there's also I sat with a game called Cyberpunk 2077 on my PlayStation for the better part of 6 to 8 months because it was so buggy where they released it so early that it was barely playable to the point where PlayStation removed it from the PlayStation store until they said, CD Projekt Red, we are not putting this for sale until you fix it.
Ooh.
So the fact that they've been like, okay, there's still some bugs, we haven't perfected it yet, we're delaying it until we do. Perfect. I'm cool with it.
I actually agree with you on that. I mean, I definitely understand the glut of Star Wars. There's not. I don't think I can say there's ever too much Star Wars, but I understand where it takes up a lot of space, and having a little bit of a delay can help out with that. I do like the fact that we're getting it after Celebration now. To be honest with you, I think we could add a little more excitement to it at that point. And I'm with you. Like, I don't think this is cause for panic. Some people are out there going, "Oh, delayed game means that something's broken, something's not ready." No, it means maybe that they just want to make sure they get it right. They have a few last minute things they want to do. I think it's better that they do it now than try to push it forward to hit a release date. I mean, that's one of the worst things you can have is when you try to push something forward to meet a release date if it's not ready. So I'm good with that.
Yeah, and they've said it's mostly performance stuff.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
it's just to make sure that when you boot the game up, it doesn't like I said with Cyberpunk, the first day I played it, it crashed like 15, 20 times.
Oof. Yeah, you
So
don't want that.
I was just like I'm not playing this until they fix it. So it's good that, just being like, hey, no, we're not putting it out until it's perfect because we know how Star Wars fans get, and if Star Wars fans plus angry gamers, That's not going to go down well if it
That's
goes bad.
not a good mix at all. Not a good mix at all.
Mm-mm.
I will say the next news bit is actually kind of related. Star Wars Jedi, you mentioned it, Battle Scars, the novel that's going to be telling Cal Kestis' story between the events of Fallen Order and Survivor. That's the first excerpt was released on StarWars.com. Now I don't know about you, but when I was a younger man, I gobbled up the excerpt because I just wanted to read everything. As I get older, I find more and more I'm like, eh, I'll wait till I get the book. I don't need a teaser. If I want to get the book, which I'm probably going to get anyway, I'll wait till it's out, then I'll read it. But if you do want to know, if the fans out there, if you're listening, StarWars.com does have that excerpt if you want to. And I have no problem with somebody wanting to do it because I get it. It's not for me anymore. How about you? Do you like to read the excerpts or are you like me?
Hell no. And here's why. I've gotten to the point where, and not to like toot my own horn, but like this counts for so many of us. Our knowledge of Star Wars and the minutiae and that every intimate detail of it has become so deep that just reading an excerpt might trigger something in your brain and be like, "Oh, that's what happens." Like when I read Shadow of the Sith, the first expert from that, and it revealed who came back in it, I was like, "God damn it!"
That makes sense.
And I was just like, because that means that, and that means that, and
That's fair. That's fair. I get that too. Well, that's how we
curse of
feel.
knowledge, PLD, the curse of knowledge.
That's how we feel. I don't know how you feel, but if you do not feel that way, go to StarWars.com, check it out. Maybe you'll be excited about it, and you'll get. Maybe if you're on the fence, maybe it'll convince you to purchase it. I don't play the games, but I do read the book, so I will read that one for sure. All right, next bit of news we have a little bit of a sad one for me. Andor season 2 not bringing back Alex Ferns as Linus Mosk. It was we found this out in a tweet. Somebody at Clone Humor tweeted petition letting Sergeant Mosk go from silly little corporate cop to silly little rebel, please. Alex Ferns himself said, I thought that would be the case, but alas, you've seen the end of Mosk. I had a blast playing him, and I'm glad you and others enjoyed him too. Au revoir. Au revoir. That makes me sad only because I loved this character. He was one of my favorite supporting roles of Andor. He added just that little bit of twitch of humor that was kind of needed in the direness of the tone of Andor. He's not a good guy. He's a bad guy really overall, but he's more of an overwhelmed bad guy. But he made me laugh, made me chuckle a few times. I thought it was a nice little, just a nice little counterpoint to some of the tone. So I wish we could get more. Is he that important that at the end of the day it's going to ruin Andor? No, it's not going to ruin Andor. But you fall in love, especially you said it before, minutia of Star Wars. We love these minor characters. There's people who have no idea who Gunji is, for example. They're like, Gunji, a little Wookiee Jedi. Okay, yeah, that's what happens. Star Wars guys like us, we fall in love with these little supporting roles that become our personal characters we like to glom onto. So I'm gonna miss them. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, it's definitely a loss because I always loved it. I always thought he was like the hot fuzz kind of humor.
That's a good point.
Added to Andor, and I was just like, okay, that shouldn't work, but it does. And yeah, it is disappointing. But then we got to remember the level of characters that are going to be coming back, and the level of characters that are going to be introduced. I mean, K2 is going to be there.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be. This is entirely speculation. But with Mads Mikkelsen going to be in attendance at Celebration, come on. And I'm sorry, but I would rather trade a Scottish Imperial grunt for Galen Erso.
It's a good point. It's a good point. And you know what? After season 1, he's earned my trust. So in Tony we trust.
We know where he is. He's on Ferrex getting drunk, just sipping out of his flask.
You know what though? Give me a comic book. Give me a short comic book tale, or put him in an anthology piece where we get a little bit of an update on where he is. Maybe he'll get into a Filoni an animated verse at some point. As long as he's voiced by Alex Ferns, that'd be fun. All right, the last bit of news is not really news. It was just more of an interesting tidbit that I found. Again, I look at StarWarsNewsNet.com. They usually serve me quite well as far as being responsible about what is fact, what is rumor, and other news, interesting tidbits of things. Slash Film, Star Wars News Net directed me towards Slash Film to an interview with Star Wars Rebels co-executive producer Henry Gilroy, who talked about working with George Lucas, working on Clone Wars and working on Rebels as well. They had a little bit of a couple of fun quotes, and it's a great read. If you look up slashfilm.com and Henry Gilroy, it's a great interview to read in full. I just want to bring up a few points that I saw in there. He mentioned specifically how George Lucas was actually a little more hands off on Clone Wars in season 1 than I kind of thought. It's kind of led to believe. I mean, who knows what's going on in the background there. We always led to believe that George Lucas was so heavily involved in the Clone Wars, and he was. But it seems like it took season 1 to showcase what they could do that excited George. George initially, I guess, was more of a hands-off. He actually initially told Gilroy and Filoni, he goes, I'm retired. I might see you guys once a year, twice a year. You guys are making this. I'm not going to be around. Because Lucas thought, and this is a great quote, Lucas thought they were making a cartoon first and Star Wars second. When he saw the first renders of the show and how it had a cinematic 2:35:1 aspect ratio, he changed his mind and said, oh, you guys are creating cinema. And from that point on, they met every week. They met every week, and Lucas got more and more heavily involved with camera work to lighting. And I mean, it just got better and better as it went along. Of course, we got to bring Maul back, which was your favorite bit. That was all what George Lucas thing.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a cool little bit and pieces. Now, moving on, we talked about an interesting part, which we mentioned, was the studio notes that was given. Gilroy stated that Lucas was like his plus 99 shield. Anytime anybody, like people who were trying to get merchandise things like that, they came to them once about like an idea they want to do. Can you put something in to justify a toy sale? And I guess George Lucas basically called and said, never contact him again. You contacted me. And that sounds kind of fun to me because, like, George Lucas is known, one of the criticisms that George was, Toy Boy Lucas, and that he created the Ewoks for toys and everything else. And yet, here we are, Gilroy saying Lucas was protecting them from the merchandising people. I got to think about that.
I think I create, like, the Lucas and anyone with the name Gilroy in Star Wars. So, like, Romeo and Juliet, it's the Montagues and the Capulets. I always think they're, like, so opposing with each other that I'm like, the fact that George was supportive of him, it's kind of a nice shock.
Yeah.
Because it's like, as you said, he created the Ewoks for toys. He created Chewbacca and Jar Jar Binks so the kids would have a character to relate to. And he's just like, no, the toys come through me. Maybe that's because he has an idea he has like an eye for like miniatures and stuff and like building out the sets with all that kind of stuff. So he knows what would look good as a toy, maybe? I don't know. But I do think it's kind of interesting that he was like, no, you don't talk to him. You come to me.
Yeah, George, another quote that George said to Dave and Henry was, you guys make great stories. Let them make the toys after. I like that. I like that concept. Who knew?
George, is that like George, like just getting in his old age that he's just like, I don't want to play with toys anymore. Just make the good stories.
One more tidbit was they talked about Rebels and how Disney was very heavily involved. Because obviously Lucas was gone at that point, and Disney had its own attempt trying to incorporate the brand into the Disney brand, and they definitely wanted a more kid-friendly tone, more humor. That's the way Rebels started out. If you remember Rebels season 1, I remember watching the Rebels season 1 when it came out, and I was kind of like, I was a big Clone Wars fan. This is a little more kiddie. I don't know if this is going to connect with me as much. Now, by the end, by season 4, I was heavily on board, and I like Rebels easily as much as I like Clone Wars. They're equal to me. But it's because of that first season, Disney kind of was interfering a little bit. And then, but Gilroy said it was his job to protect the Star Wars brand. He specifically mentioned that Disney had sent them at one point an image of Ezra riding Chopper like a skateboard. And it looked so bad that Gilroy put his foot down and said, a droid is not a freaking skateboard.
Yeah.
But funny enough, like the best part about that topic is that as the show went on into season 2 and 3, Rebels was allowed to take a more serious tone. Disney backed off on it, and they stepped up, and they were allowed to do much more than they thought they were going to be do at first. For example, by the time they got to like the end of season 2, we had Maul slashing Kanan's eyes out. Spoiler. So
Yeah, that's definitely one moment, and just like even just like the look of the Inquisitors and going to Malachor and like that whole like that's a super dark arc of episodes.
100%. So I'm glad that they kind of found the balance they were looking for. I think that's what definitely, but you can definitely see how it took a little bit to get there, and that seems to be how it is. I think they found it much more quickly with the Bad Batch. So
Yeah,
hopefully that's how we'll go moving forward. So, well, that ends our little news bits for today. Our secondary talking point today, we're going to be talking about the Clone Wars legacy. Now, as huge fans of the Clone Wars, this made perfect sense to me. I just finished rewatching the Clone Wars, and this episode is basically, I'll put it out there like it is. It basically took a 4-part unused Clone Wars arc. They tweaked it, they threw some things out, they squished it down and make it to one episode of the Bad Batch, and that's what we got this week on the Bad Batch. If you didn't realize that, I don't know. Our listeners, if you're fanatics like we are, you probably know a lot about this. But if you are more of a casual fan, you might not know more about this. This legacy canon media talking point. But we're gonna try to educate you a little bit and talk about it, and maybe talk about how this could happen, and maybe what we could see in the future potentially. Because Dave Filoni never throws an idea out. That's something I've learned about Dave Filoni over the years. He always keeps in the back of his head. He always finds ways to put things out. He's still just like our favorite quote recently, where he's talking about filming Ahsoka. He said he's finally filming things he's had in his head for 5 years. Exactly my point. He never throws things out. So the biggest piece of news: Clone Wars was canceled after season 5. They brought it back for season 6 for Netflix, The Lost Missions, and then it was done after that for quite a while until we got season 7. Until season 7 was brought back.
God, yeah, that was a while between the two.
Yeah. Now, after that, Pablo Hidalgo had said that after season 6 was completed, that there were 13 arcs in production, along with some various ideas. Now, I'm going to detail the arcs that we have and what we don't have, and we're going to talk about a few of them, and then that'll lead us into our Bad Batch review. So, you're here for the review. Stay tuned. We're almost there. We're getting there. Now, the quick ideas we'll touch base on that were never really developed, but these are the things I want you to keep in the back of your mind, because if they're in the back of Dave's mind, they're probably going to come back at some point. We got A, Zillo Beast returning. Makes sense. We actually thought that was going to happen this year as far as the Bad Batch trailer
Still might.
And it still might. It still could. The second one was Aura Singh was supposed to come back in several episodes, including one in which she was going to be killed off, interestingly enough. So the little tale that Woody Harrelson, Beckett, told Lando could have been a Clone Wars arc at some point.
Oh, man. Imagine Woody Harrelson coming and voicing in like a Clone Wars arc. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. We have a Tales of the Jedi. What's the possibility we get a Tales of the Bounty Hunters?
Oh, that would be sick.
Little snippets. I think that might be. And you're talking about doing Tales of the Jedi season 2, Tales of Jedi. Yeah, do Tales of the Jedi season 2. Let's do some Tales of the other things. Tales of the Bounty Hunters.
Yeah.
Tales of the Pirates.
Tales of the Scoundrels.
Tales of the Scoundrels. You could do a lot of different arcs that way. Little small anthologies, 6-episode things, your little mini release dates or things. I think it's a great. I think we could do a lot with that. I would love to see Filoni and company really explore the possibilities we could have in that. So many different places in time, different places and spaces in the galaxy. A lot of things you can do. So now the last idea before we get into the more realized arcs, the one I hope we do get. This is one of the ones I really wanted to get that I heard about before. It was not as much as the Siege of Mandalore, which I'm very glad we finally got that. But there is supposed to be a continuation of Barriss Offee's journey. Now, we have seen Barriss Offee. Last time we saw Barriss Offee was at the end of the Ahsoka trial, where she turned traitor, was stopped by Anakin, but still came out and declared how the Jedi were wrong, et cetera, et cetera. Now, interestingly enough, the original ending for the Ahsoka trial arc, Barasafi was supposed to have killed herself. But they changed that because Dave Filoni had an idea. I want to know what that idea was, and I want to know where this comes into play.
I mean, there's the segment of the fandom that are adamant that Barasafi was the one that saved Grogu.
I've heard that as a rumor. I don't love it, but I don't hate it either. Because even though she was turned to the dark side to a bit, it was definitely out of a good place.
Yeah.
She had some good intentions there. So you could, and Star Wars is all about redemption. So you could see something along those lines. And that might be a way to do it. Maybe that is the way to do it. Although, maybe that's Tales of the Jedi Season 2. Maybe that's where we get that arc, the Untold Clone Wars arc of Barasafi's continuation.
We know somewhere Dave Filoni, I don't know if he's like Jay-Z and just has it all up in his head and then just comes out with it, or if somewhere he's got a hard drive with all these ideas written down, but I need to get a hold of it.
Yeah, we can get
wherever it is. I need to get a hold of, like, there's probably like a big folder that just has Dave's random ideas written on it. I just want to read it.
I do too.
It's just a random notepad file of just like random bullet points of ideas. I'm like, God damn, we should have gone with that.
Feed it to me. Absolutely. Okay. Well, we do have 13 arcs we were talking about in production order. We had a Bounty Hunter arc, which was production 5.22 to 5.25. So that was an unreleased arc. We did get a little snippet of that in a celebration the celebration I was actually in Orlando, where you got to see a little piece of it, and Daniel Logan definitely voiced some of it. So there's definitely some work out there. The next one was Crystal Crisis on Utapau, which was eventually released on StarWars.com as an unfinished story reel. We had Ahsoka's Walkabout, which was tweaked and turned into season 7. We have the Bad Batch arc, which was the introduction to the Bad Batch arc, which was initially also released as a story reel format until it was tweaked, and then it was moved on, and we got to see it in season 7 as well. Slightly different, which we'll talk about. Two of the arcs there, so an 8-part arc, basically separated into 4-part arcs, was Dark Disciple, which was turned into the novel Dark Disciple. Saj Ventress and Quinlan Voss. We'll get into that. We have the Kashyyyk arc, which we're going to talk about because it definitely is heavily involved with our episode today in the Bad Batch.
Big time cherry picking from that one, I felt, in this episode.
Which has actually inspired this entire conversation. We have the Son of Dathomir arc, which was turned into a comic book.
I love that comic so much. It's so good. Please adapt that into a Tales of the Sith.
That would be cool. I will also say that it is out there. There is an audio comic of it out there on YouTube, which I'll just share.
Dave, send me that damn folder.
We had 3 unknown arcs. We don't know where they fit into the production value. They were 7.01 to 7.04, 7.09 to 7.12, and 7.13 to 7.16. They coincide with 3 arcs that I'm going to talk about. One was a Rex and R2 Top Gun arc. One was a Yuuzhan Vong arc, for lack of a better word. And there's one called Return to Jedi Temple, which was phenomenal sounding. And then we have a final batch. We had 2 more arcs. One was a Return to Mon Cala arc, which has also gone unreleased. And we have the final one from Siege of Mandalore, which is obviously the finale of the Clone Wars, the finale of season 7, and that's what we got, which is brilliant. So moving into a little more in-depth discussion on these. Obviously, we don't need to talk about the season 7 ones too much because we've seen them.
Yeah.
I could do a whole episode on Siege of Mandalore, but that's not what we're here for. Ahsoka's Walkabout was fairly the same, except for the fact that the Martez sisters were not involved. Instead, we had an Asian lead called Nix Omandi, I believe his name was. It was supposed to be an interesting romantic counterpart for Ahsoka, which I would have liked to have seen. I mean, I don't hate the Martez sisters. I think they're fine. I like them in the Bad Batch. But having Ahsoka dally in a romantic after she left the Jedi could have been a very interesting angle, given what Anakin and Padme, like a little mirror of Anakin and Padme, but Ahsoka's not a Jedi anymore, so she could actually look into it and go, I'm not a Jedi. This is something that could happen. That is
Yeah.
intriguing to me. I think that's a little more interesting than the Martez sisters would have been, my own self.
Yeah, especially with like she obviously she knew something was there between Anakin and Padme. Whether she knew to the full extent of what was going on, but she knew that there was something there. So she would have been like, look, this is okay.
Right.
Yeah, I shouldn't feel any guilt about this anymore. So
Right.
let me pursue this.
It's been interesting to see. Obviously, she had her little mini dalliance with Lux Bonteri. I mean, it wasn't
Oh
much of a thing. They had the crushes going on,
Mm.
but they couldn't because she was a Jedi at the time. So it would have been interesting to see that juxtaposition as well. I almost wish they would have gone this way, but at the end of the day, I'm still happy with what we got. Obviously, and then finally we had the Bad Batch arc. Which was pretty similar overall. They took out a little bit of humor. You mentioned at one point off air they had there was a sequence in the very beginning where they had Padme like painted like a pinup girl on
Yeah.
on their ship.
The
Anakin not being too happy with that.
the unedited version is out there on the internet. I've seen it. It is pretty damn funny.
It's a story reel. Because it actually was released as a story reel format.
Okay, there we go. Yeah.
So there actually was out there just not finished animation. And I have to say, of all the 13 arcs, if they were given credence, it looks like they were probably given credence because they said, okay, you can do 12 episodes, you can do 3 arcs. It makes sense why they picked what they picked. You have to have the finale. You have to have Siege of Mandalore. You're going to be doing a Bad Batch cartoon. You're going to want to introduce them properly.
Mm-hmm.
You had to get properly. You couldn't just start with the Kashyyyk arc because then have the Bad Batch there because you need to introduce the Bad Batch. So basically, that served as a backdoor pilot, and it was fun. I remember when it came out, I was a little, I don't know, annoyed is the right word. I want to say I was annoyed at anything, but I was like, oh, well, I already saw this in story reel format. It's almost a little bit of a waste. I'd rather see something that I have never seen. I really see give me one of the arcs I don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
But from a business standpoint, it makes absolute sense in the world. The final arc, Ahsoka's Walkabout, was absolutely necessary, not because the arc itself is anything important, but we last saw Ahsoka at the end of season 5 after her trial, walking away from the Jedi.
Yeah.
The Siege of Mandalore is her having to come back to Anakin and Obi-Wan to talk about Maul and everything else, the final point of it. So we can't just have her leave and then the next thing we see is her coming back. We need to see a little bit of her out on her own to make that character development. And quite frankly, the only other arc that she was in, as far as this goes, as far as I can tell, rather, would be this Return to the Jedi Temple arc, which also had also coming back and teaming up with Anakin and Obi-Wan, which we'll get to that in a little bit. So that made sense that you put this one in there as a breather of this is what Ahsoka was doing outside of the Jedi. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
All right, next up, we had the Crystal Crisis on Utapau, which was a story reel. So we do have that. We get to know the story, get to see all 4 episodes, just doesn't look pretty. It's just not rendered. It's kind of funny watching the block just kind of move and the faces and you hear the voices, but they're not talking. They're not actually moving their lips. But it's enough to get the story point across. And there's 2 major points in that. If you haven't seen it, it does take that step towards the Death Star because the crystal is a giant crystal that they're trying to find in Utapau. That's definitely honing in on the super laser aspect of it. And the other part of it was, the main part for me was actually a tender moment when Anakin is talking to Obi-Wan and quickly, without thinking, is, I'll call the temple and I'll get Ahsoka to,
I can't.
And it leads to this great little mini discussion between Obi-Wan and an angry Anakin who's kind of pissed off, like, we didn't help or we should have done more. And Obi-Wan's very empathetic and he's trying to help, but it's one of those situations where I know you're feeling this, but I don't know how I can help you. Do you remember, did you actually watch this story reel?
I did, yeah. And it led to me feeling more of like, I don't want to say it's not justified, but right. I get why Anakin turned. Yeah. Like I get it. And there's like Ahsoka leaving. There's the moment where he's like, I wish I could walk away. And like anytime I watch that back now, especially now I've seen like this story reel and everything, that I'm like, even now, like years after we know what happens, in that moment, I'm still just throw the lightsaber down and go whither you absolute fool. Just go. Just leave.
Right. Uh,
But
it's very crushing. It's very, very crushing. But so I would like to see this finished. I would love to see it finished. It's not going to be at this point. There's no reason to. I understand. But it was. I'm glad it was released in this format at least, because at least we get to see something of it. Okay, we got The Dark Disciple, which is obviously an 8-part arc, which has turned into a great novel, an audio novel.
so good.
This had a potential to be one of the highlights of the Clone Wars if we had actually got a chance to see it. Obviously, it has the fates of Asajj Ventress at the end of the Clone Wars, towards the end of the Clone Wars, rather. We get an assassination attempt on Count Dooku. We get Quinlan Voss, who actually dips into the dark side a little bit at points. See where he's going. I still feel like that's a name thrown out so much that we're going to get something with him at some point. I feel like it has to happen. We have all these TV shows, all these TV shows, these live action, these animated shows. I figure it's got to happen at some point. The name is too popular not to. But this will serve. This serves as a great Quinlan Voss story with Asajj. So it's definitely, if you haven't checked it out, you really, really should. I just got the audiobook. I'm actually going to listen to it again. And I don't do audiobooks very much, but I want to do it for this one. Do you read this one and enjoyed it, I assume?
I love this book. It's one of my favorite arcs, just solely because of it's not just a purely dark, like more dark side tale, but it's the giving into the passions and the emotion of it, and two people who are so completely different yet have similar mannerisms, like Asajj and Quinlan, in that they're both wild beings, like,
right.
And they're brought together under this circumstance of, like, he's trying to assassinate Count Dooku. She's wanted him dead forever,
right?
And it's just like, you get a love story out of hatred for this evil. Yeah, finding love in a really weird place.
Yeah,
and it's just like, wow, how they came up with that. It's almost like it's so perfect. I don't want them to adapt it. I don't want to have the same conversation that we were having with the Ahsoka story in Tales of the Jedi. I don't want to have that conversation again with Dark Disciple. Like, it means too much to me to be like, cool, someone has a problem with it. I don't care.
I think you have to center yourself, and you have to say exactly that, and let it just roll off your shoulder like this. If you want, I'd love to see it animated. I mean, I don't think we will. There's not any real reason to at this point, but I would love to have seen it done, because I do think it's great, especially considering if we had seen it. If Clone Wars had continued like it was supposed to initially continue, this was divided up into 2 arcs. So it would have been interesting to see like it start and how it would have maybe floated over for a little bit until it was reached its culmination. It had the potential to be like one of those big arcs that they had started doing by the end there. So either way, if you haven't read it, definitely go do so. And also, if you haven't read it, go do the next one, which we talked about earlier. Son of Dathomir was turned into a comic book, to 4-issue comic book miniseries. And I believe, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, it was actually released in Dark Horse. It was like the last of the Dark Horse imprints before Marvel took over because of the Disney side of things. Yep. But it's still considered canon, absolutely considered canon, and takes place between after Darth Maul got his ass handed to him by Sidious and the death of Savage. It definitely did happen. Sidious took him,
let him think he won.
Like a rag doll, like a little bitch. He took care of him. Let's be honest. I'm sorry. It just proves how powerful.
If
Sidious
that
was.
were true, then Sidious would have had the Darksaber, and he didn't. So that means that there was more to that fight than we got to see.
It's actually an interesting point that, technically speaking, Sidious is probably the true owner of the Darksaber. Although no one knows that, though, so we don't have to worry about that. No one else knows. Only Sidious himself knew about that, but he didn't care because he was like, I don't. He's like,
go ahead. I'll let you keep your little black sword.
I'm going to rule the whole galaxy, and Mandalore is included in that, so don't worry about it. But anyway, after Darth Maul I just was saying that because I looked at. To rile Matty up. I do love it. Sidious and Maul had the battle. Maul was captured and brought by Sidious to a different place. This tells you between that and where we see him again, obviously in the Siege of Mandalore, when Ahsoka takes him He baits Ahsoka into coming to Mandalore, trying to bait Obi-Wan to come to Mandalore. We get to see what happened in between, which is this very cool arc. We get to see the Mandalorians who are loyal to him still help break him out. We get this moments with Mother Talzin.
The Mauldalorians.
The Mauldalorians. I love that. I love that. Yes. We have the Fate Mother Talzin, Dooku's involved. We get Grievous involved. It's a whole big party of the evil side. It's all the evil characters in one, which is why I know Matty loves it.
I love it.
A lot of cool stuff happens in this arc, and I would really love to have seen this arc animated. I did get to see, like I said before, I got to see an audio comic, which the voices were really kind of cool. They're pretty fitting overall, honestly. So it was really as close
the Sam Do, Savage, and more.
No, because it wasn't. It was a fan thing. It was like it was not a true official release thing. This is a fan put the comic book in motion and hired people.
I'll need to listen to that.
But the voices are pretty solid. There's sometimes you can tell they're not exactly the same voices, but they do well enough that you can kind of close your eyes and go, okay, it's good. It's still pretty good. It's still pretty solid.
Okay, so, I'm gonna check that out then.
Absolutely. I don't want to say you should buy the comic book if you want to do that first. We have bought the comic book ourselves. I don't want to say that pirates.
I think I got it twice. I think I have two versions. I think I got 2 copies of it.
I have one.
Yeah, I have 2.
I have one version of physical, and I have one for my Kindle reader or whatever.
Maybe one day we'll do like a giveaway.
No, that'd be cool.
And I can like give them like this copy of it.
That would be very cool. Well, okay, let's move on then to the unreleased arcs. This is the one that's most interesting because these are ideas that could be mined in the future, like Bad Batch did with this episode. First one we'll talk about was entitled Rex and R2 Top Gun. The quote from Dave Filoni was that this is before Top Gun Maverick came out. This is before Top Gun Maverick was like a big thing and got it back. And so this is when Top Gun wasn't really in the cultural icon as much. He says, this was Top Gun with clones. It was basically the Army clones, the ground forces, got into an argument with the pilots, and their astromechs got into an argument. R2 insulted the astromech, and it became this thing where Rex ended up having to fly a fighter with R2 as his co-pilot. And the only little bits and pieces we have of information-wise is that Rex and R2 were supposed to crash on the moons of Ryloth. They get to reprogram a B-2 series super battle droid, which they became very familiar with and fond of. Rex got injured at some point. It started out light and fun, but went to some surprisingly dark places. What's your initial reaction to that? And would you have liked to see that? And is it possible to see that somewhere else?
Hell yeah, I'd want to see that. Now, like they have to do that. If we're not going to get Rogue Squadron, at least give us this. Because can you imagine R2 being like the goose to Rex's Maverick?
R2 can't die, so that's one thing. That's true. We can't have that. But otherwise, yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Rex is just flying along and he's like, talk to me, R2. And R2's like, I'm here, dude. He's just beating the back like,
I feel the need for hyperspeed.
That needs to be a t-shirt. I like that.
I love that. I would like to see that too. I love the fact that it starts out light and fun, but goes to surprisingly dark places. I like that aspect. Some of the best Star Wars stories I've seen are like when they're isolated. Like, for example, the Callus and Zeb story when they're on that. I think it's Dishonorable Ones or something. I'm not sure the name of the episode, but they're caught on the moon together. Yeah. I like seeing that. It kind of brings out these things that you don't get to see much of in these personal storylines. Perhaps we could get to some point as a Tales from the Clones or some Tales of the Clones storyline. I feel like our show is just about us throwing out tales about everything. That's the way to fit in our anthology.
There's also like, we say this, everyone's gonna be like, oh, we had Tales of the Clones. It's called the Clone Wars. Shut up. Yeah, give me this. That's right. Give me this arc. I don't care if they got to do it as a 2-part special or 3-part series of Tales of the Clones. I don't care. I want to see this.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Somehow. I'm just giving away that we can make it work. That's all I care about.
It could work. It needs to work. It better work.
Absolutely. Okay, next bit we have the Yuuzhan Vong storyline, which, if you don't know the Yuuzhan Vong, if you read Legends, the Yuuzhan Vong had a very big saga named after them. Not named after them, but starring them. They were the big baddies of the New Jedi Order, which was a large book series that took place in the Legends universe. The Yuuzhan Vong were an alien race from a different galaxy who were immune to the Force. And they were very much against anything mechanical. It was very an organic thing. Some people liked the Yuuzhan Vong storyline. Some people thought it got a bit bloated. I am one who highly enjoyed it, but also did think it was a little bloated. I think they could have cut that down from like 19 books to about maybe 7 or 8 and probably gotten enough of the same things across.
Yeah.
Overall. But interestingly enough, this was like called the Yuuzhan Vong unreleased arc, but reportedly it wouldn't actually have much to do with the Yuuzhan Vong. The quote was from Pablo Hidalgo saying the storyline really played on the alien abduction vibe. It was almost an X-Files episode of the Star Wars The Clone Wars, which sounds great. It does say that Yuuzhan Vong would have been minimal. It was going to start as a scout ship trying to assess the strength of the Republic. I don't think they even would have been named the Yuuzhan Vong, technically speaking. It would have just been like hinted at, cherry picked on, if you know kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the Vong would not have had any Force immunity, which is interesting because it did truly match up with Lucas's description of the Force, which is interesting. It tells you how much Lucas didn't really care much about what was released back in the day as far as expanded universe goes. Those novels, Lucas never really cared about what they did too much beyond a few certain things. So they would have changed that way. And we wouldn't have gotten into the origins of the Vong, but they would have been from another galaxy. That's all I really know. So it sounds to me more like the X-Files part of it actually makes it more interesting to me than the Yuuzhan Vong part of it. How do you do X-Files in Star Wars when you are in outer space with all these aliens? So how do you do an alien abduction episode, which makes it freaky in Star Wars? I guess you put them from a different galaxy and you don't know them.
Yeah, I guess that's the way you got to do it. You go to like the unknown regions or a completely different galaxy, because what are you going to do? Have like Anakin walking along on some random planet and just get beamed up to a spaceship? No, they're just going to have a Republic fleet go after the ship.
That's right. Absolutely. So I don't know what else would have been there. Would have been interesting to see, of course. We have 2 other ones. I'm going to jump forward. I want to say the Return of the Jedi Temple one to the second to last. I'll tell the Return to Mon Cala arc first, which would have been the second to last arc, at least as far as production value goes, as far as production order goes. I think it probably would have been a little bit earlier on, because it doesn't seem like an arc to lead into the Kashyyyk arc. But this was, as Dave Filoni says, this was for the Teeks fan out there, Teeks fans out there. Basically, it had Padme working against Palpatine's prolonged stay in office. It had Padme and Anakin going to Mon Cala to meet with King Lee Char again, which we met obviously in the Mon Cala arc from season 4. Nassau Ree was murdered, and Teeks was appointed provisional leader in his place. And Teeks was frustrated with Palpatine as well, and they were working with Padme to a degree. Now, I will be honest with you again. Sometimes things just don't connect, right? Sometimes things don't connect with you. I know if you love the Mon Cala arc, I'm happy for you. I'm excited for you. I'm glad. I've watched the Mon Cala arc a few times. It's not my favorite arc. It's not an arc that really hit with me very much. I thought I didn't really, when I rewatched it again, I didn't get much more out of it this time. It's got some nice action beats, but overall it's pretty forgettable compared to some of the other ones. So having a Return to Mon Cala arc, I do like the idea of Padme working against Palpatine's prolonged stay in office, because that's a step down that path of Padme forming a rebellion, so to speak, that we kind of get in the deleted scenes of episode 3. So that aspect is kind of interesting. But the rest, there's plenty of other arcs that are in this description that I'd rather see more. What about you?
Yeah, I think that I would have loved to have taken the main theme, the main plot of Padme working against Palpatine, and perhaps worked it a different way, because the Mon Cala arc I thought was fun, but it was one of those ones I was just like, oh, okay, that was cool.
Yeah.
But the main story plot, main story point, absolutely, I would have loved to have seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we got the Return to the Jedi Temple was the second to last arc we're going to talk about. This is one that unfortunately we're not going to get to see this one, or at least as it is, because it definitely screws with continuity a little bit. I will say we would learn about what lays beneath the Jedi Temple, which we know is the Sith Shrine. I guess this is the first time we're going to get into that, because we're going to have a Sith Shrine at the bottom. We're going to see giant skeletons of kaiju down there, which is kind of cool. So maybe that's where the Zilla Beast angle comes in. The idea was, I guess, Ahsoka had discovered a threat and returns to go with Obi-Wan and Anakin as they set out to rescue Yoda from the shrine, which is interesting to me. I don't know how he gets there. Who takes Yoda prisoner? That sounds a little strange. I want to know more.
Perhaps it was when he was going on his Force ayahuasca trip.
Yeah,
He
I was
ended up
wondering
back
about that
down in
too.
the shrine.
I was wondering if that's part of it. I wonder if that's how it kind of came to be potentially. The last bit was that Darth Sidious would have tried to be breaking into the holocron vault of the temple, but Ahsoka would have had to hinder his progress somehow. Again, that's tough to say. I mean, we saw how Sidious handled Maul and Savage. Like, it's hard to imagine Ahsoka really being a complete threat, even at this level, at this point in her career. At this point, and it does kind of remind me. It's kind of strange that we're doing that again. We had a little bit of the repeat. We had Cad Bane break into the vault before us. Now we're having Darth Sidious. Like, didn't you get what you got last time? Is there what's new in there you need to get? Again, I would like to see what they came up with, and maybe they have a great point that we don't know about yet. Obviously, Dave, we trust a lot of different things, but that does make me question some things. Obviously, this is what I mentioned before. We couldn't have this be brought to life because we couldn't have just Ahsoka all of a sudden just returning to Obi-Wan and Anakin like nothing happened. And of course, one of the main reasons we can't have this now is that, as far as canon goes, Darth Vader, in the Tarkin book, Darth Vader learns that there's a Sith shrine underneath the temple. So he couldn't be there with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan, and unless he just forgot it somehow. That doesn't seem right. Otherwise, taking it out of canon and everything else sounds like a sick arc. Sounds like a fun arc to deal with. I mean, you got the big baddies. You got Darth Sidious involved. You have Obi-Wan, Anakin, Ahsoka, and a Sith shrine underneath the Jedi Temple rescuing Yoda. What's not to like?
I'm sold. I'm sold. You had me at Sith shrine. I'm sold.
I do. That's the case for you. You're very easy to please. I'm not going to lie.
That's true. I've heard that a lot.
Maybe someday we can get like an Elseworlds kind of, or an alternate universe kind of
between worlds.
World Between Worlds release, maybe a comic book release or something like
Star Wars What If.
Exactly, which I'd love to see. So, okay, finally let's get into it now. We're going to get into the Kashyyyk angle, which will lead us into our discussion on the Bad Batch episode from this week, Tribe. I want you to hear this quote from Pablo Hidalgo. Tell me if it feels like this was inspiring to this particular Bad Batch episode. Some of George's earliest notes really talk about the way the Wookiees commune with the trees. And if you find, this is another thing that we do, we've got all these old interviews with George that he did back in 1977, where he was basically speaking in the voice of the character to someone at Lucas Licensing at the time, giving them the sort of information they needed about the backstories. There's one where he goes on and on about Kashyyyk and talks about their ability to commune with nature, and it's almost Force-like, their sensitivity to what the trees are like.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot, especially because I wonder if there's like I wonder if maybe he read Lord of the Rings. Absolutely. And there was the whole thing with the Ents in the forest and being part of the trees being, almost sentient beings themselves. I wonder if that's like something because we know that George likes to take influence for things like Dune, Hidden Fortress, and everything Kurosawa. And I wonder if that was just like a little nugget that he took. And it was just like, okay, I'm gonna run with that.
Radagast the Brown is a Jedi. It's as been mentioned before, a possibility. But also, it makes sense with George, as we notice a lot of George's things. Even the Jedi and the Sith are the main focus of Star Wars, generally speaking, as far as the Force goes. George liked to explore the fact that there were other Force users out there who connected the Force in different ways. You had the Night Sisters, you had Mortis, a bunch of different groups. So having the Wookiees being so naturally connecting to the trees in a Force-like way makes perfect sense for me as far as George goes. George always said the Force is in all of us. It's the life, the trees, the rocks, the stones. That makes it very much sense to me.
Midichlorians, say it.
Midichlorians, I'll say it. I have no problem with that. I know. I'll read down the couple notes we had from this arc. And this is going to be, again, this was a 4-episode arc, which we pushed down to 1 episode in Bad Batch. Characters would ride on giant ape lizards that were holy to the Wookiees. We got to see the Wookiees on some pretty cool creatures. Tarful would have been in it, and would ask the tree spirits for permission to go into battle against them. And he just asked the trees for permission to go into the battle. And we kind of had that. They didn't really ask permission, but they communed with the trees before they went into battle.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, and that's right, the battle was against a number of Trandoshans, led by Bobwa Venamore, Commander Venamore, who was working with the Separatist Alliance, or in this case now the Empire. Interesting thing that we definitely got tweaked out. One of the things that was definitely taken out of the arc because of, especially for time purposes, the clones wanted to burn trees to get rid of the enemy, and the Wookiees were upset by this. And they had this big thing between the clones and the Wookiees deciding whether or not they could burn some trees, some trees, things like that. Obviously, that was something that would have been an interesting dramatic point and some way to it would be great, interesting to see unfold. But it's definitely something you can get rid of when you need to save time, as obviously you do when you go from 4 to 1. Yeah. This was obviously an episode with the Bad Batch, so it makes sense that we have it in the Bad Batch now. It makes absolute perfect sense. This arc is the one that they put into the Bad Batch. The Bad Batch was going to be with Yoda. It was Yoda and the Bad Batch, and a big role from Chewbacca would have been involved in this arc as well. Obviously, we can't have Chewbacca now. We can't really have Tarful now because this is post episode 3. We can't have Yoda now. But we have everything else. We have Omega instead. Yoda troopers would have had his head silhouette on their helmets, kind of almost foretells of the Ahsoka and the 501st in a way, which would have been kind of cool.
Yeah.
We had mention of the Kinrath being involved. The Kinrath from Knights of the Old Republic, and we get to see the spider creatures.
Yeah, I hate those things.
Speaking of Lord of the Rings, of course, in the Kashyyyk arc, though, they would have involved in fighting the Bad Batch and the Wookiees a little bit. Again, another tweak that now they only fight the bad guys. If you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. Another tweak. I kind of like that. It's okay.
Whereas you play them in the game, you can leave them alone. They still attack you.
They still attack you. And finally, would have contained references to the holiday special. It would have been fun. It would have been silly. It would have been fun. Silly in Clone Wars. I love it. So, that is the end. That's all of our unreleased Clone Wars. That's the ones that we have. So we could still see some arcs that are minor, some things that are minor, maybe brought to light later on. We see that we have this whole arc that was brought to light in the Bad Batch. There's other ways that these could be done. But let's get into our main topic now. Yes. From this Kashyyyk arc, let's talk about that episode of Bad Batch called Tribe. And of course, if this is your first time here, well, if you've been here now, you've almost been here an hour. I haven't said anything yet. Click that like, click the subscribe. Join us. Join our patreon.com/PLD projects. We're trying to get to 500 subscribers on YouTube. It's a modest goal, I feel. We are marching in that direction. We'd appreciate any help you get. But how we review these shows, we break them down into segments. Instead of just talking, he did this, they did that, we talk about little segments, and we find it's the best way to interact with each other on the episode at hand. So let's get right into it. Our first segment we always do on PLD Projects, Holy Snokes, Hondo Watch 2023.
Insolence! We are pirates! We don't even know what that means!
It's simple. Does Hondo Ohnaka appear in the Bad Batch season 2, episode 6, Tribe? Unfortunately, the answer is no.
This effort is no longer profitable!
Sad to say.
This might be the one time where I'm like, I'm glad Hondo wasn't there, because this was such a spiritual and like kinetic episode that I feel like Hondo and the brand of humor coming in. I feel like that would have been welcome. Obviously, we love Hondo, but I feel like it would have taken away a little bit.
I don't disagree. But it did inspire me a little bit. This episode inspired me to think of something. Now, I mentioned earlier about some people having problems with potentially too many Jedi surviving Order 66, etc.
Hondo killing kids.
Now, here's my thought, though. Hear me out. We got Gunji now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What a great storyline would it possibly be if Gunji wasn't the only youngling to survive? One more youngling survived. And that youngling, Katsuni. And how did Katsuni survive?
Hondo. Yes, dude. Yes. Okay. Yep. That's it. That's the show, everyone. We're leaving on that bombshell.
Right?
Thanks for joining us. No, that is great. That
I mean, because we had that moment, Hondo and Katsuni had shared that moment at the end of the Clone Wars arc, right? Obviously, when Hondo kidnaps them, but at the end of the day, they kind of just share that connectivity. He gives her a look as she leaves. It would be great if like he hears about something, maybe he heard about Order 66. I don't know. He goes, Katsuni reaches out to him somehow, and he smuggles her away because he has a heart of gold in there somewhere. And eventually, maybe they reunite. Gunji gets to reunite with Katsuni through Hondo, which I learned,
there
by
was
the
that
way.
moment where Gunji looks back at the cage. He didn't look too hopeful.
No, that's very true. Well, but I expect most of them are dead. I expect Katsuni to be dead too. That's what it says in Wikipedia, that she's believed to be dead. I get that, but we can still have the other younglings die. Still have Katsuni. That'd be a heartwarming way to have them, because now Gunji's all alone. Although he gets with the Wookiees now. Does that break apart the meaning of the episode where Gunji is home and found his people, then to find Katsuni? I don't know. Maybe, but I'm just throwing things out there.
Yeah,
It would be
I'm all
interesting
for
to
it.
see.
Hondo saved Toonie. That's my headcanon.
Well, this is, I actually found out when I was doing research for this. I didn't realize this. Sometimes you miss things, even in all the minutiae that we have. That Hondo's ship is named Katsuni. He has a ship
Oh yeah.
during the Rise of Resistance ride. Everything, his own ship with that name is named
Yeah.
Katsuni. So that just
No.
sparks a little more to me. I'm kind of like, okay, all right, maybe I see you, Hondo. I see you. So, all right, let's move on to our next subject. We call this one mission briefing.
What do you need, Rex?
Any chance I could use you for a mission?
Well, this is quite simply where we just kind of sum up the episode and what we had, so we know what we're talking about here. This will be a quick one. We kind of open up. It was very much into the action right away. Right away, we're into the action. They go to this place called Vanguard Axis, which is a smuggler regime that is completely run by droids. It seems to be a thing in Star Wars recently where droids are running everything for some certain thing. They're delivering some code chains. We discover that the Vanguard Axis has Gunji in hand and is torturing him a little bit, trying to deliver him to some buyer, which is interesting to me. Who's buying Gunji? We don't know. We never find out about that. Of course, Omega finds it, and Omega's not going to leave that alone. So Omega, the Bad Batch, take Gunji with them. They blast their way out, and because they don't know what to do with Gunji, they take him back to Kashyyyk. We get to Kashyyyk. Of course, we have the Trandoshan raiders there, burning villages, taking out different Wookiee villages and things of that nature. We meet some more Wookiees, and then, of course, the Bad Batch, Gunji, and the Wookiees help repel the Trandoshan raiders, at least for now, in a way. And Gunji is with his people, and the Bad Batch have new friends, and we leave from there. Did I miss anything? Is that the main crux of the story, pretty much?
Yeah, that's pretty much the main crux of the story. Yeah, they find Gunji, go to Kashyyyk. Those pesky Trandoshans are still there, which to me that adds a lot of context. And I know that's already been there. That the Trandoshans and the Wookiees, they're not on the best of terms. But my man Black Chrysanthemum, I now also have some added context as to why he hates the Trandoshans.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is definitely part of it. I was actually wondering if we're going to get a little Black Chrysanthemum in here.
There was I did see a Wookiee with black fur.
Could have been. We don't know. I mean, they are old as dirt. They have that long lifespan, so maybe it was. We don't know. We don't really know, at least for now. I'm sure somebody will ask that later on. But all right, then let's move on to our next segment, and then we'll catch up at the end if there's anything else that we've missed. We call this segment The Bachelor.
I was hoping for the whole squad, but you'll do.
Where, as much as we love the Bad Batch as a whole, we pick our favorite character of the week. Doesn't have to be a member of the Bad Batch, but whatever character really spoke to you, you thought did something special. Let's start with you, Matty. Who was your Bachelor of the week?
My Bachelor for this week is a first-time nomination and a first-time winner of the award of Bachelor of the Week. Is Hunter.
Okay.
I feel like this episode really played to his strengths of being somewhat spiritual and like aware of his surroundings. Obviously, he's a hunter, he's a tracker, so he knows the lay of the land. He knows the landscape. He knows the creatures and their ways and their customs. So I feel like this episode really played to his strengths. And there was also this scene where Gunji was kind of hiding away from them, and he was just like, "Look, whoa, back up. He's gonna be afraid of us because we're clones." So
Right.
he's been through a lot. So him having that understanding was like, okay, so Hunter really has come a long way, because before he would have been like, "Hey kid, like we're just gonna drop you off," and now he's like, "No, listen, I understand. We didn't follow that. I did not follow that order."
You bringing the
So
rock in.
yep,
Start
I had
tricking
to, I had
me.
to find a way. I had to find a way. So yeah,
Um,
it's mine is Hunter.
I get that. I mean, he had that also that line at the end, the very kind of very deep moving line where he's talking to Yana, the Wookiee village leader. He's like, they're just kids, but they can't be kids in today's world. It's not my favorite line, as we're going to get to soon, but I gave Hunter the nod last week during our episode with Ken, as grumpy dad vibes were really affecting me. I also gave Hunter the win this week as well, though. And I agree with what you say, but I want to take it a step further. What I loved about Hunter this episode is we really see Hunter take a step forward as far as his development goes, as far as doing the right thing.
Yeah.
As we know, part of the issue had always been, as we started from the Bad Batch back in season 1, Omega was their conscience. Omega was the one who would not let them do anything that was wrong. She'd push them to do stuff that was right, even if Hunter was trying to save their skin and trying to survive and trying to keep them all alive. Omega still didn't care about that compared to doing the right thing. And she always had a good partner in Echo with that, because Echo, as a reg, was loving. He was loving being with Rex, for example, and doing the right thing as far as fighting the Empire goes. Hunter was always kind of like the, all right, we'll do it. He'd sigh. He wouldn't be into, but he would do the right thing eventually. But he was always more about being the protective father, not being a bad guy.
Into it, right?
Not being selfish. He's not being like, I'm a bad guy. I'm just being selfish. Their main goal was protecting everybody. His main goal was protect the Bad Batch. But in this episode, we had a couple of times where he just stepped forward. He saw Gunji getting hit or whatever, taken care of. They were spare smuggling him out, and that he didn't hesitate. No, you can't do that. You have him with the Wookiees and everything else. He was raw away. We'll stand up for them. We're going to fight them. We're with you. And every time Omega and Echo would want to do something, Hunter was there, backing them up almost immediately. So it just was for me, it was all about Hunter taking those steps forward to being the real leader of the Bad Batch, the real leader the Bad Batch needs to be in order to make their way in the galaxy and still be a force of good. So,
yeah,
that's what I like. So both of us are voting for Hunter.
Yeah, I want to give an honorary mention to Echo as well, because it seems like Echo really is the one that's like, nah, dude, we need to fight these bastards for real. Like that's him. Like he's pushing. Echo's the one pushing this, because maybe it is because he is the reg. He is the one that's like conditioned as like the warrior that does the right thing from being around Rex and being around Anakin. That he's like, look, no, this is wrong. We need to stop this. We have the ability to stop this. We need to do something. So Echo gets an honorary mention from me, but yes, Hunter is the winner for this week.
Absolutely. I will also give Echo a little bit of a nod also for one of my favorite moments of the week is when he at first rejects the Wookiee ale or whatever it is, the drink at the end. And it's like, but at the end he tastes and goes, not bad. Very metaphor for Echo at that point. And okay, we'll move on to our next segment. Our next segment is, of course, I Spec.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent. Now get out of here.
This is where we take our favorite lines from the week, our favorite lines from the episode, and choose what really affected us. And what really, it could be a funny line, it could be a quip, it could be humorous, it could be something deep and momentous. Matty, go ahead. What was your favorite line of the week?
My favorite line, it's kind of a weird one because I had no idea what he said, but it's just Wrecker yelling in Shriek. It literally, the caption, I watched it once through normally and once with the captions on. It literally just says Wrecker yells in Shriek. And it's as that he's like jumping down for like the big battle. It's just Wrecker going, and I'm like, so we've moved from Wrecker's grunt to Wrecker yelling in Shriwook. I love it.
I did see that as well. Actually, I watched all the episodes with subtitles on always. I just like to catch names and things like that I don't quite catch. And I love that too. Does say it was one point it says like just yells like a Wookiee. You're like, nice. That's very Wrecker. How Wrecker is that?
And my, I guess, honorary mention is Tech saying the cause of that blaster fire was either Echo or Omega. Most likely Omega.
I wrote down 3 quotes, and that was one of mine as well. It's that Tech unintentional comedian thing that you mentioned. They talk about all the time. It's just the way he says it, so dry. It's just yep. It's either gonna be Echo or Omega. Yeah, most likely Omega, because that's what she does. She gets into trouble.
Don't leave her alone for a second.
The sigh is there, even though he doesn't sigh. I had 2 other lines I did want to write. I wrote down to talk about. One was humorous and one was not. I'm going to choose the not humorous one as my actual quote of the week. But I'll let you know my humorous one since we're in the humorous side at this point. I love when Hunter watches them talking to Wookiees. He's watching the Wookiees commune. And the Wookiees something like the tree, like, well, the trees have a plan. The trees are planning or whatever. And he just turns and goes, the trees have a plan. All right.
Yep.
Totally accepting it. Like, this is how far Hunter's come as well. He's like, all right, sounds good, but he's not gonna bash their religion, not gonna bash things. Like, well, it makes sense to me, but well, fuck it, let's do it,
Yep.
But my favorite line of the week, I'm gonna go with the serious one, and it has to do with why Hunter is my bachelor of the week. It was from when he was on the Vanguard Axis, and like I said before, he noticed when they find that Gunji is being smuggled on and being sold. The droid says something like, oh, he's gonna make a price, blah blah blah. He turns to them and just says, you can't smuggle living beings. And it wasn't even the line that was important, it was the delivery.
Yeah.
It was like a stone cold delivery of like, this is in the area of right or wrong, where Echo and Omega are usually the conscious points. That's a line you're not crossing with Hunter. Hunter right away is like, we're on opposite sides now. I'm going to whoop your ass if you don't change this up right now.
Yeah.
I love that delivery so much. It was like this. Yes, I was like getting a fist pump home. I'm like, yeah, you're all going to die.
It speaks to Hunter's, for lack of a better term, ability that he is very much connected to nature.
Yeah,
he's absolutely a clone that's connected. He's something artificially created that is so connected to nature and so the surroundings that it's, yeah. I completely get why you picked that line. So yeah,
I love it. All right, let's move on to our next segment. We call this one "Put That in Your Holocron and Snoke It."
Do you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Okay, this is where we take a look at the deeper side of things. We look into things that were mentioned that we want to see maybe explored further. Not necessarily Easter eggs, but something that we noticed that we said, you know what, I want to know more about this. Tell me more about this. Dave, get to it. I had a couple things, actually. A couple things I want to think about. But one line totally sold me. Now, maybe this is me missing a minutia. Maybe you know about this and you're going to tell me about something.
No, I think I know where you're going with this, and I think it might be one of mine as well.
When the Trandoshans are on Kashyyyk, they report something about, oh, it's more of these carved stones. And they say, blast the carved stones, whatever. What are the carved stones? What are these things? Are they important? Are they important to the Wookiees, I guess? But, like, are they significant as far as, like, is it a force thing? Is it a religious thing? Like, what are they?
I think they are probably just, like, idols that they've crafted because the massive tree is very much like akin to the Norse religion and the Norse gods of, like, you have the great tree of life and the Wookiees got to speak to the trees and get permission from the trees to go to war, whereas the Vikings would go and they would speak to the gods and get permission they would only go to war if they got permission from the gods.
Right.
It was very much that whole, like, unison of that culture. So I feel like, and also again, like the Vikings, they would have like big idols that were carved out that they carved themselves. So I think it's just kind of one of those things that they maybe like they paid homage to the great tree.
It makes a lot of sense to me. I just kind of want to see explored more. I want to see let's get more. Maybe I just want more time in Kashyyyk with the Wookiees in their village. Maybe a little anything besides the holiday special. We don't know much about Kashyyyk and how the Wookiees live. Let's explore that more at this point in canon. We could have silly nods to the holiday special, but let's see more in canon what we're dealing with here. We got a little touch on that a little bit in communing with the tree. We see how important that is. I want to find out more. I had one other, but I'll let you go. What was your big moment that you wanted to see more of?
Well, I'd say yours actually wasn't what I expected. I was expecting it to be more. What were the Bad Batch doing on Kashyyyk the first time? Was it did the thing with Yoda happen, but like off screen
in a different way?
Yeah, but my main thing, and this is something that we could actually maybe do this as a segment, is we talk about like different styles of storytelling in Star Wars. I would love like a National Geographic series of all the wildlife on Kashyyyk. And get this, Steve Irwin's son is a massive Star Wars fan.
Oh,
so if you have a character voiced by Steve Irwin's son that is like a National Geographic,
a guide to the galaxy's creatures and things of that nature. I like that idea. I like that you can put that as a segment, as like a YouTube thing. That'd be great. I think we should add that as a segment to the show because we always have these creatures and stuff we're talking about. So we have to look forward to maybe a Holy Snokes segment on a Galaxy Guide because we saw a bunch of creatures this time. I don't know what those creatures were that the Wookiees were riding, but I want to know more about them.
No, I have no idea either. And who better to tell us what they are than the son of the crocodile hunter himself?
Yeah.
G'day, mate.
Absolutely.
Son.
I mean, we could always use more accents. We already have the New Zealand accent in there. Let's throw it in there. I like it. I appreciate it.
We got Boston accent. We got the English accent.
Do it up. One more thing I did want to mention, even though we don't have to, I mean, we usually give one each, but we don't always have to limit ourselves. I we'd like to know more of is the Vanguard Axis. It's the first time I'm dealing with them. And that droid, they seem like a cool base. I want to know more about them. Who do they deal with? How are they getting along? How did they even start that?
I will say when they said Vanguard Axis, I was like, oh shit, is Luthen about to show up?
Ooh, that would be interesting.
Because I didn't hear Vanguard, I just heard Axis.
Right.
Like, they're dealing with someone shady named Axis. Holy shit, is Luthen about to walk through that door?
I didn't even think about that. But interesting, very interesting. Okay, cool. All right, our next segment is an easy one. It's parsecs out of 11.
It's a ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
So less than 12 is 11 because we always turn up to 11 on PLD projects on a scale of 1 to 11. Where do you rank this episode? What
I give solid 9.5. I connect to this as a lover of nature myself. I love the whole like spiritual and like showing that it's the old theme of Star Wars that shows up. It's the natural versus the mechanical. In this case, you had which I thought was kind of cool, the separatist tanks with the Imperial logo on.
Yes, that was cool. I also love that. Actually, I think before I go into my rating, one more thing I forgot to mention, I love that part where Hunter turns to them and is like, how do they get Imperial tanks? It's such a dark and ominous line. Like, we as the viewers know that the Imperials are kind of subcontracting out to people like the Trandoshans and bounty hunters to kind of wipe out the people. And it makes sense. The Empire doesn't even have to do it themselves. They're like, you know what? Well, the Trandoshans hate the Wookiees. Let's let them take care of the Wookiees for us. Yeah, we'll give you a few tanks. We'll supply you a little bit. Just go do your thing. It's cheaper. It's easier. But the in-universe cast, like Hunter, is from like, wow, what's going on? I don't understand this. It's just that slow descent into, oh my God, how oppressive is the Empire going to be? We're still at the early stages at this point.
And what part did they play in it becoming that way?
Exactly. So I love that little bit of horror in his eyes, a little bit as he starts realizing, God, have we been fighting for the wrong side the whole time? I don't even know. It's right from the top.
Both sides were the same side. They just didn't know it.
Absolutely, and that's what's cool about the Bad Batch. And people keep saying some people say it's like a again using that that it's not important. It's not an important story. Yeah, it's wonderful story to see the quote unquote smaller side of things. We get the Skywalker saga with the people at the top of the food chain, the Lukes and the Vaders, and everybody else getting involved with that. Here we get to see the Bad Batch. We're not quite citizens, but they're really kind of like the everyman of the universe, and see how it's affecting them, seeing
Yeah.
how they slowly are seeing everything take over. It's horrifying to watch in an Andor like way. This is still very much Andor to a degree.
Yeah.
It's a little bit just done a little with a little more spicy adventure that the Bad Batch does. That's the only difference, really. But yeah, I love that. I'll say it now. My part check, I give it an 8.5 out of 11. I like it pretty much almost the same as you did. I like the nature aspect of it. I like seeing that slow descent. I like getting Gunji back. It's good to see more characters in different formats, as we know. It just, and one other thing I noticed is that I think I want to say. No, I'm going to say this for the next segment. I'm going to say this for the next segment.
Okay.
But I'm going to give it 8.5 out of 11. So that's where we're going. Now let's get to that next segment. Our final segment of the episode, we call this one Force Vision.
Premonitions? Premonitions.
Now, this is where we talk about our predictions is the right word. We talk about moving forward. We try to speculate responsibly and see where are we going to go. Is it as far as next week goes, maybe, or it could be later on in the season, or it could be years from now. We could speculate on how something in this episode or the current episodes might influence Mandalorian or Ahsoka. It could be something that far away. We don't know. But what are some predictions going forward in the story of Star Wars? And the reason I hesitated at my last bit was I wanted to bring up one moment at the beginning of the episode where you're on the Vanguard Access and Hunter and Tech are talking to the droids while Echo and Omega hung back. And Omega had a bad feeling about this. I keep thinking if this happens, I think it's going to be a brilliant thing. I'm still holding to the case that Omega is somehow Force sensitive. And
I feel you were going down that road.
I want it to happen so badly because they've done such a great job, because there's a temptation in the storytelling to give it away too soon. And it could have been done by, like, you could see all these teases where it's like, okay, she's Force sensitive. Let's move on at this point. Revealed it already because hint here, hint here, hint here. We haven't done that. But there have been hints going so far back as the first episode, the first aftermath. Like the moment where she takes the blaster for the first time and shoots it out of Crosshair, shoots the blaster out of Crosshair's hand. And even Hunter's like, wow, where'd you learn to shoot like that? I never shot a blaster before. She has moments like this throughout where she just has a bad feeling about something. She's a gut instinct about something. She knows what to do. She's able to deal with the Ordo Moondragon herself, learning things. I don't think she's like a strong Jedi or anything. Not like she's gonna be whipping things around. Like, it's not gonna. I don't think it's gonna be like a tale like of Ezra learning his Force sensitive and becoming a Jedi by the end of the show. But just enough that she's a Force sensitive in terms of the cloning side of things. I think that's where the key is. I think that's the special clone aspect that they were looking for. Can we clone somebody who can access the Force? I think they never have before, and that's part of my problem. I think we would have seen Darth Maul cloned a bunch of times by Sidious to have an Inquisitor army of clones of Darth Maul kind of thing. Imagine Darth Maul with an inhibitor chip that you control Darth Maul, and he's your master warrior type.
Now we're going into dangerous territory.
Right?
Well, I'm like, my brain is starting to run wild.
But for some reason they couldn't, because maybe the clones couldn't access the Force. They found a way with Omega. And it's not a full-on, maybe that's the experiment needs to make it more solid, but that spark is there. And I feel like they're doing such a great job with the subtlety of it. I do feel like eventually it's going to be revealed, and I think it's going to be a wonderful reveal.
I mean, we got Mount Tantus. What's going on in that?
Mm-hmm.
But there was also, I don't know if you caught it, there were two little hints that I thought about, but then I'm just immediately dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
When Gunji's calming the Karthus spiders, like Omega looks at him like, oh.
Yes.
And then there's also the moment where Gunji ignites his lightsaber and moves really fast past her. She looks at him like, huh. So maybe there is something to it was something that I noticed in my head, and I was just like, nah.
I think I don't dismiss it. Don't dismiss it.
It's like you said, those little moments, and now that you've said that, it's made me think maybe I wasn't crazy thinking about it, especially the moment where he calms the spiders.
Mm-hmm.
She looked at him like, huh, that's cool.
Yeah. I think she knows a little more about it. I think she might be more interested. I think she might even know about it more than she's even letting on. Maybe she's trying to forget it because she knows the Jedi aren't good right now. It's not good to be a Jedi right now.
Or
She's just trying to survive.
She knows she has some abilities. She just doesn't quite understand them.
Yeah, that could be a case too. I don't know exactly the details yet, but that's where I'm going, and I'm hoping we see it eventually. If we don't, not going to be the end of the world. I'm not going to say that's going to ruin it for me, but it's just something that I'm thinking going forward might happen. And I will point out, last thing I'll point out before I talk, let you do your Force Vision of the week. The 15th episode of this season, the penultimate episode of the two-parter that ends the series, or the season rather. It's called The Summit.
Mount Tantus.
Now, I don't want to get too high psyched because, quite frankly, it could mean anything. Summit could be anything, but it would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it really would, and especially bringing in was it Nala Se or Tanwi? Which canon did they take at the end?
Nala Se, yeah.
Nala Se, that was it. Nala Se's there, so
Mhm.
she's got some inkling as to what happened to Omega. But
Maybe
yeah,
Pershing is there too. So
God, yeah, Pershing is there too. Holy crap.
maybe at this point, depending on how old he is. So,
What
I don't
the
know.
hell is going on in that mountain, dude? But yeah, my Force Vision. Again, I shouldn't look at these episode titles, but the next one is called Clone Conspiracy. So we got the two part like mid-season, not finale, but the mid-season double header, which means some issues about to go down.
Yeah,
because we've got the Clone Conspiracy and Truth and Consequences. I think we're heading back to Coruscant, and I think Sheevy Palps is gonna have to explain to the Imperial Senate why the hell did they bomb the crap out of Kamino.
Interesting. I think you're correct. I think we've been waiting for Palpatine. We know from the trailer that Palpatine's appearing, so it would absolutely make sense to have him appear in a mid-season finale, so to speak, or whatever you want to call it, because this is going to be a big episode. This is going to be the kind of episode that the people who are not quite as into it, like we are like, oh, this is the episode I want to watch. These are the episodes I want to watch because this is the story points moving forward episode, so to speak, not the enhancement episodes. I agree. I think something's going to go down. I think that's a good place. I think we might get to go back to Coruscant. We might get to at least see Palpy in action and talking about it. We know Omega's going to watch Palpatine give that speech. Could be a lot of good things going on there. I wonder exactly how it's going to go down. We're going to get Rex back sometime soon too. For that, in that case, though, I think that's what's going to happen.
Maybe Rex is the one that sends him to Coruscant.
Could be from our very own mission briefing.
What do you need, Rex?
Any chance I could use you for a mission?
Could be exactly that. All right, folks, that is the end of our episode this week. Been a little longer than we usually do because we had the great discussion on the Clone Wars legacy. That was enjoyable to you as it was to me. And where can the folks find you, Matty?
You can find me on Twitter at Matty Gunner, Instagram Matty_Gunner. You can find my band Mourner, MOURNER, on all streaming platforms. You can find me here on PLD Projects every Tuesday for Class Action with Mr. Danusa and Richard Eric Jarvie. And you can find me here every Wednesday for Holy Snokes, Star Wars podcast. And over on the Wild Jones Podcast Network every Thursday and Sunday for the ONU MMA show, talking all the goings on in the world of combat sports. We are coming back next week. So make sure if you're a fight fan, tune in. Hear us talk absolute nonsense.
All right, you can find me at Paul_Taduzio on Twitter. I mentioned before we are marching towards 500 subscribers here on the PLD Projects YouTube channel. So any help you can give us that way would be greatly appreciated. Share it, tell your friends, come hang out with us. You can join patreon.com/PLD projects if you want more. We're going to do some bonus content there. Have a great chat going with a bunch of great people, such as Allison Salamoni, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, and John Lustrina, and a bunch more as well. Also, of course, we have 4 weekly podcasts on this channel. We have Class Action, as mentioned by Matty, myself, Matty, and Richard Derek Jarvie. We have Holy Snokes, a Star Wars podcast every week here, this very show. I have a show called Crown Jewels, which comes out on Friday, which is myself taking you through every song in the Queen catalog and solo catalog as well.
What song are you doing this week?
We're doing a song called Dear Friends, a short and sweet piano ballad. Short and sweet piano ballad. It's kind of interesting that it follows one of the hardest rocking songs Queen ever did with a song that's just a piano and a voice. Just how Queen, that's what Queen does, though. And of course, we do Two Mediocre White Dudes on Film. We're still going to eventually do Lethal Weapon 2. We were supposed to do it this week, but PG and I decided to go live and talk about the DC slate that was announced by James Gunn.
That was announced this week? I completely missed it.
Go back under your rock, Matty. Go back under your rock. But that's it, guys. I really appreciate you. Hope you come back next week. Obviously, a double banger from the Bad Batch. We'll be talking about both episodes. And in addition to that, we are actually recording a bonus episode of Holy Snokes next week with two special guests. I'll just mention them now. Why not? Hopefully, if I announce it, we don't change our mind or change our plans. But as of right now, we're recording an episode with our special guests, Paul Preston, Adam Witt, the movie guys. So that's going to be a laugh a minute.
Yes, it's going to be a Ford Fiesta Holy Snokes crossover. That's right. We're going to be celebrating all things great about Harrison Ford in Star Wars. The character of Han Solo. The funny interviews that Harrison likes to give whenever Star Wars gets brought up. I don't care.
Grumpy Harrison Ford.
Grumpy Uncle Harrison. I'm looking forward to it. Adam was kind of like the first guest that we had before Holy Snokes became Holy Snokes.
That's true. We did. We did Adam Witt. We had Class Action that turned into Class Andor because we couldn't stop talking about Star Wars. We did the Andor wrap up, and Adam Witt was a great guest with myself and Matty. Really enjoyed talking Andor with him. So yeah, it was great that that kind of inspired us to do Holy Snokes to a degree. It was like, we love talking Star Wars. Let's just talk Star Wars. Yeah. So it'll be good to have Adam Witt back on. And Paul's also a funny and amazing guy as well. So it should be a blast and a half. I'm not sure when it's going to come out. We're taping it next Thursday, I believe. Probably come out on Saturday. That's my guess after everything's done, depending on how things get edited. So, but that's then. This is now. May the Force be with you always, folks. Much appreciated. Take care. May the Force be with you always.